All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is the daily vlog 155, I think. So today, I just literally like 10 minutes ago just finished watching a documentary. It's called Butterfly in the Sky. It's all about reading Rainbow. It's a fascinating documentary. It made me tear up a few times. Anyone is young enough that they don't know what it is. Reading Rainbow was a television show in the 80s that lasted all the way until 2006 is when it finally ended. And the basics of the show was LeVar Burton of insert LeVar Burton thing here. Was the host of this show that would talk about books and just a love of reading. And in general, the show would use a children's book as a framing narrative to kind of investigate different things. Like one of my favorite episodes, the episode is titled The Bionic Bunny Show. And it's named after the book, The Bionic Bunny Show. Bionic Bunny Show is a book by, I can't remember the author's name, but there was a book series called Arthur that eventually got turned into a TV show on PBS for like a decade and a half called, funny enough, Arthur. And it was about all these anthropomorphized animals just kind of living their lives. It was a children's book series. And one of the things in the series was Arthur and his friend Buster were really into this television show called The Bionic Bunny Show. And so The Bionic Bunny Show was basically a book kind of explaining how the Bionic Bunny Show was made. And it's a cute little book, but what they did was while they were reading the Bionic Bunny Show, they'd read it normally in like 3 parts or 4 parts. And then in between each one of those, they would explore something in the real world. And what they did for that one is they actually went to the set of Star Trek The Next Generation, on which LeVar Burton played the character of Geordi LaForge. And they showed a little bit of behind the scenes on like how they shoot a scene. They went and they showed how some special effects were designed. They showed how the transporter effect worked. Like that was super cool. But anyway, the entire purpose of the show was to create this love of reading. And funny enough, here's a little spoiler for the end of the documentary. It's not a real big spoiler because it's talking about something that happened, over a decade ago, almost 2 decades ago now. But around the early 2000s, there was this program that was enacted all across the country. It was called No Child Left Behind. Anyone that grew up during that time or shortly after it is probably very familiar with No Child Left Behind because it massively changed how schools worked. Effectively, what No Child Left Behind was intended to do was our academic standards were not doing super well. The U.S. Has been on an academic decline for decades when you compare us to other countries like Japan, and quite a few different European countries as well. We're just, we have some of the smartest people in the world here, but they don't get smart at our school system. Let's put it that way. Which is why a lot of the people that tend to change the world are like high school and college dropouts. The Bush administration had this brilliant idea that we were going to go back to kind of fundamentals. And so No Child Left Behind, a lot of people still don't understand exactly what it was. Effectively what it was it put a really big emphasis on fundamental education skills. Reading, writing, arithmetic, effectively. And the way that they put the focus on that was they designed testing that could prove that kids had mastered these skills. And they tied everything in education around teaching the fundamentals and testing the fundamentals. Now, again, the name Trainer Jody has nothing to do with Pokemon. Trainer Jody, I am a trainer. I used to do it professionally. Now I do it for fun because I can't work anymore. Disability rocks. I can tell you right now, written testing is one of the least effective ways of testing comprehension for anything other than basic memorization. If you're trying to test how good someone is at memorizing facts, figures, things like that, written tests are absolutely phenomenal for that. Literally everything else, it is an absolutely horrendous method of showing competency. And there's significantly better things, and we're starting to find that out all across education in general, though we are still kind of stuck, despite the fact that No Child Left Behind, it was an abject disaster because the whole testing thing. It's no longer the prevailing theory. Again, we had another big shakeup during the Obama years that was called Common Core, specifically tailored around math. That was an epic, abject failure because, again, they still rely on this testing thing. And Common Core in and of itself was not taught very well to teachers. And then they were forced to try and teach this thing that they didn't understand to kids, which made it even more difficult to understand. And to be perfectly honest, the people that understood Common Core the best were probably the youngest kids that got introduced to it because they had the longest amount of time to learn it, and they probably learned it significantly better than their teachers. So anyway, when No Child Left Behind came out, Reading Rainbow got all of its funding pulled because they were funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And that was money that the government gave to make children's educational programming. Well, with No Child Left Behind, education meant No Child Left Behind. It meant fundamentals. It meant testing. And Reading Rainbow didn't do that. Reading Rainbow taught kids to love reading. It didn't teach them how to read. The thought process behind it was, if we get them excited enough about it, they will find out how to read. And the cool thing about reading is the more you do it, the better you get at it, which is true about just about everything. But the barrier to entry for reading is one of the lower ones as far as hobbies exist. You don't have to, buy $100 worth of minis and, $50 worth of paints and spend time painting them to create your Warhammer 40K party. You don't have to get $150 worth of, or $180 worth of books and then, 7 of your friends to be able to play it. You literally just have to go to the library, get your free library card and check out some books and learn how to read, which is easier for some people than others. But there is still a barrier to entry. It's a significantly lower barrier than a lot of other hobbies. So because Reading Rainbow didn't teach any core fundamentals and did not help with preparing kids for testing, its funding was pulled. And that was the end of Reading Rainbow. Why do I care about this, and why is the title of this something to do with Geek and Sundry and we're talking about Reading Rainbow? Well, because Geek and Sundry was the Reading Rainbow of a second generation. Like, I was a Reading Rainbow kid. I grew up on Reading Rainbow. A memory I will never forget. I can hear it in my head. Is the sound of James Earl Jones, Darth Vader, Mufasa. Pick a role he's been in. He's phenomenal. But I can hear in my head constantly the sound of James Earl Jones reading, bringing the reins to, I think it's Patiki Plains or something like that. But there's one line in it that just, the big black cloud, all swollen with rain. And I hear that over and over and over again. And that was from Reading Rainbow. So yeah, I grew up on Reading Rainbow, but then I had kind of a second renaissance when Geek and Sundry came out. And that's where I came up with the title. This is one of the few videos where I know what the title is going to be before I recorded it. Geek and Sundry gave us permission to be passionate. And that's what Reading Rainbow did for multiple generations of kids. And let me explain. When I was a kid, a lot of the things that I was into, I wasn't allowed to talk about. I know where you're going. No. I was into video games. I was into computers. I was actually really into math for a long time. I still am. I still really, really enjoy math. I'm weird like that. But when I was hanging around with the rest of my friends, I really wasn't allowed to go, oh my gosh, guys, did you play the new Final Fantasy? It's so amazing. Or Power Rangers. That was a big thing I was into when I was a kid. I was massive into Power Rangers. I obviously grew out of my Power Rangers stuff. I actually did. And not on purpose, not by choice. I was told as I was getting older, this is a kid's show, you're not allowed to be into it. And I had to kind of divest myself away from Power Rangers because that's not what adults do. And I'm not talking about like I was getting to like 8 or 9. It's like, well, the Power Rangers is for young kids. No, I was like 13, 14 looking at going into high school when I was finally starting to go, my parents were going, maybe you want to, what about music? Music's really cool and you're good at the saxophone. Why don't you look at that? But as I grew older, I got passionate about music. I got passionate about acting. But my friend group and my family, to be perfectly honest, they didn't really like how hyper invested I would get into things. And a lot of times, if it wasn't something that they were interested in, here's a crazy thing. I know this is going to sound nonsense. We used to eat dinner as a family, like all around the dinner table. And like we didn't have a TV even in the same room. And so when we were eating dinner, if it got to a topic where I was getting too much into it, it would be, okay, it's enough of that. Let's go do something else. And it was even things like both my parents are music heads. Like both of them played jazz. My mom played clarinet. My dad played sax, and I think played clarinet a little bit. Both of them were in jazz band. My mom was a marching band kid. I was a marching band kid. But for whatever reason, whenever I get too into something, it was always, no, we have to stop that. Okay, that's not proper dinner table conversation. And so I always felt that my interests weren't okay. Like they were fine to talk about and do in private, but that wasn't what you did in public. And then Geek and Sundry happened, and I watched Tabletop, and I watched a bunch of guys getting together and playing board games. Board games which I had been told were for loser kids. And I was an adult, you're not supposed to do that. But a bunch of grown adults, older than I was, were going and playing board games and having an absolute blast, and they were passionate about it. Will Wheaton specifically was massively passionate about board games and what they could do. And that's what Reading Rainbow was. Reading Rainbow was a group of people that were passionate about stories, which affected me greatly. I'm a dungeon master now. I tell stories. I tell 2 to 3 different. I'm writing 2 to 3 different stories every week, depending on which campaigns that I'm running. And I'm constantly writing new ones in my head. Stories are a really, really big deal to me. And so Geek and Sundry gave us permission to be passionate. And I finally realized that it was okay for me to not just like things. Like, oh, did you see the new X-Men movie? Yeah, it was pretty cool. Like that was what it was for me. It was like, I would see oh, did you see the new X-Men movie? Oh yeah, it was pretty cool. I couldn't go, oh yeah, I can't wait, because actually the X-Men that they showed in there are actually one of the newer kind of collections of X-Men. The X-Men that my personal favorite was Gambit, the old like late 80s, early 90s run of X-Men where you had Gambit and Jubilee, and I wasn't allowed to do that because that wasn't cool. Watching a movie, that was perfectly fine. Obsessing about a movie, no. Same thing as Lord of the Rings. Oh, did you see Lord of the Rings? Oh yeah, Lord of the Rings is super cool. Viggo Mortensen makes a great Aragorn, but I wasn't allowed to go, well, actually, the Lord of the Rings trilogy is really a great book series, but I think The Hobbit is just paced a lot better, and the characters, I believe, are just a little bit more fun. I mean, I read The Hobbit when I was like in grade school, and I really, really loved it. And then I tried to read through The Lord of the Rings, and I was just never able, or I barely was able to get through the Two Towers. And then I got to The Return of the King, and I just threw it all away. But you know, the idea of the Ring and Bilbo, and then Smeagol's a really interesting character, and you weren't allowed to do that. And then Geek and Sundry comes around, and you were. And then the Geek and Sundry vlogger search came around, and not only was I now given permission to be passionate about things, I was now being asked to share my passion with other people, possibly as a part of Geek and Sundry. And yeah, I can't tell you what a life-changing experience that was for me. Because again, I had a best friend. I still do. Like, he still exists. We just don't talk as much anymore. But I met this kid in the 3rd grade. His name is Kevin. His name still is Kevin. And I met him in the 3rd grade because we had the same watch. Like, I can vividly remember sitting at the really crappy lunch tables that we had. The lunch tables that we had were these things where they would fold up, like they were on wheels, and they would fold up like this, and they had these little, like, purple and blue stools. Like, one was purple and one was blue. And so what would happen is they would be like this, and they would fold up like this, and then the stools would all be right here. And then when they would go out like this, all the stools would kind of move down and move in. And those are the crappy lunch tables that we sat at. And I remember leaning over and going, hey, that's my watch. He's like, hey, that's my watch. And we became inseparable. And so Kevin and I were into a lot of the same things. We both liked the Animorphs books. I loved the Animorphs books. We both liked video games to a point. I think I was a little bit more into video games than Kevin was. We both, he was much more an outdoorsy kid than I was. I was a very indoor kid, and Kevin was a very outdoor kid. he didn't just become a Boy Scout. He became an Eagle Scout, and did all the really cool stuff, and yeah. It was one of the reasons why we started growing apart, because I got massively into music and the arts, and he went into more technical stuff. And he couldn't. I firmly believe my best friend is tone deaf, because not only could he not carry a tune, like he couldn't tell pitch at all. We went to karaoke together once. That was an experience. Because I was a trained singer at that point, and he wasn't, and so I think he sang Superman, and I can still remember hearing him sing it. And then I sang, I can't remember which one it was. I can't remember. I did a duet with another one of our friends of Come What May from Moulin Rouge, and I got a bunch of drunk people in a bar to stop drinking and just stare at me as me and this other woman. I think her name was Martha. Sang this remarkably good rendition for drunk karaoke night. Anyway, going back. So Kevin and I, again, we had similar interests, but it was still one of those things that I wasn't allowed to get passionate about things. And so Geek and Sundry changed that, and it absolutely changed my life. And I think more than anything else, the legacy of Geek and Sundry was allowing adults and young adults to be passionate again. Because again, we it's hard to explain until it happens to you. But there's a point in your life where you're basically kind of taught it's not okay to be really excited about things. Unless they are absolutely 100% life changing. Like, you're allowed to be excited about winning the lottery. You're not allowed to be excited about the latest issue of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers The Return, no matter how amazing it is. By the way, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers The Return is really freaking awesome. And if anyone doesn't know what that is, it's a comic book series that was co-written by Amy Jo Johnson, who is the original Pink Ranger. Go find it in a comic book store. It's amazing. So, yeah, as I was watching this documentary about Reading Rainbow and how their big focus was on spreading the love of reading and how effective it was. Like, they have actual data to show. One of the numbers that they throw around there, I think, was they were able to show that reading comprehension skyrocketed with love of reading. And when No Child Left Behind came around, they said, great, love of reading. How do you quantify that? How do you test for that? You can't. Love of reading is not a metric. You don't have like +3 love of reading. You just love reading. So you can't quantify it. It's just something that happens. And so that's when funding for all of it went away. And that was in 2006. And Geek and Sundry showed up 6 years later in 2012. And so for 6 years, the world was a very dark place where no one was telling you that loving something was okay and being obsessed with something was okay. And then Geek and Sundry showed up again, and it changed the world. One of the numbers that they talked about in the Reading Rainbow documentary was Reading Rainbow increased children's book sales 800%. For anyone that doesn't understand what a massive deal that is, some basic business talk for you. When you are entering a new market, it is not uncommon to see anywhere between 20 to 80% growth, roughly. The numbers that I saw most often for new emerging markets, somewhere between about like 30-50% growth month over month, because you can't do year over year when you're entering a new market. There's no year to compare it to. Once that's done, in general, your growth metrics are going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5% growth year over year. 800 is much larger than 3. And this was countrywide. I don't know if those were worldwide numbers. I know at least it was countrywide. Because I have no idea how much of Reading Rainbow made it overseas. Yeah, like that is insane. When we fast forward 6 years after it's gone, Tabletop shows up. In the board game industry, there was a term coined, the tabletop effect. Excuse me. Need a drink. The tabletop effect was basically when a board game showed up on Tabletop, they would instantly sell out their current printing and would be forced to make an additional printing. And it happened, I think, for 3 years, because Tabletop only was around for 4 years. In the 4th year, there was a lot of problems with it. None of them from the people that created Tabletop. Well, one of them from the people that created Tabletop. And that was just, there was an issue between Will Wheaton and Boyan I can't pronounce his last name. Started with an R, though. Boyan was the rules guru for the show, because a lot of times they were playing games that Will had never played before, or had not played in a very long time. So it was Boyan's job to make sure all the rules were being done correctly. And there was an issue in season 3 or season 4 where Boyan got some things massively wrong, and it turned into this big thing. Boyan left the series. But that was the only internal thing. Everything else that sucked about season 4 was all alpha and legendary. So anyway, for like 2 or 3 years, every single game that was featured on tabletop sold out. Very similar effect to the world that Reading Rainbow had. Once it caught on, it increased sales of the thing that it was teaching people to love. And that's what tabletop did. Tabletop taught people to love tabletop games. And it was unbelievably successful, not just in creating a really entertaining show to watch that's still fun to watch, but also there was a direct market effect for it. Critical Role was never about selling Dungeons and Dragons to anyone. It was always about a bunch of friends getting together to do something that they were passionate about and selling you on that passion. The original purpose of the Geek and Sundry Twitch channel was just to get people excited about stuff, to teach people that it was okay to be passionate. It was to give permission to be passionate. And it changed the world. It really, really did. The current tabletop RPG boom that we are living in right now, part of it can be directly attributed to Geek and Sundry and Critical Role. Not all of it. Stranger Things helped. The Big Bang Theory helped, though the Big Bang Theory did not help anywhere near as much as people want to claim it did. Because, fun fact, the Big Bang Theory was a show making fun of geeks. The geeks were still the butt of the joke, they just seemed in on it. And so that was okay. But it was still a show that was making fun of geeks. And one of these days, I have an idea for a show that I want to do. That basically all the show is I go to TV shows that have depicted D&D and just rip apart how completely wrong they are about how you play Dungeons and Dragons. Like, Community did 2 different D&D episodes. Neither one of them resemble a single D&D game I have ever played in my life. They were written by people that don't play D&D. The TV show Recess, one of my favorite shows as a kid, had an episode where they played D&D along with a bunch of other things. TJ gets his arm broken, and he's not allowed to be on the playground for like liability issues, so they send him to indoor recess with a bunch of kids that voluntarily stay indoors. And one of the things they do is they play D&D, and the way that they play D&D, they never roll a d20 in the entire show. There's not a single d20 roll. The biggest die they roll is a d12. And the only reason I know that is I can recognize the shape of a dodecahedron, and it's different than the shape of icosahedron. There's no numbers showed on them. And they play on this really weird, like, multi-dimensional board where they have these little pieces and they move them around the edge of the board. It does not play like any version of D&D that has ever existed, ever. And in the like 3 weeks or 4 weeks that he exists, he goes from being a level 1 character to being a max level character, which also cannot happen. So one of these days, I want to do a series where I just sit down and I just go, okay, obviously they're attempting to emulate this. The Big Bang Theory did D&D as well. And again, nothing about it was D&D at all. The thing that drives me the most nuts every single time is there's only one set of dice. Every single D&D show I've ever watched the entirety of my life, they only have one set of dice and only the Dungeon Master rolls. I've never sat down at a D&D table where there's only one set of dice and the Dungeon Master is the one rolling it. I have sat down at tables where it was not prepared for, and so everybody shared dice. I've seen that, but you always rolled your own hits. So yeah, anyway, going back to the entire purpose of this video. Um, we need a new Geek and Sundry. We need a new Reading Rainbow. We need something that tells people it's okay to be passionate about something, and here is what I am passionate about. Because I truly believe one of the biggest reasons we have so many kids now that are turning into adults, and by kids, I know when I say kids now, I no longer mean like 8, 9, 10 year olds. For me, kids are like 18, 19, 20 year olds. Because I know how I was back then. And even just 5 years later, when I got to about 25, 26, I've been living on my own a while, I was so different and I had such a different view on life that it was just bonkers. So yeah, we have all these kids, young adults, and now full-grown adults that grew up without somebody telling them, hey, it's okay to be passionate about things, and this is what I'm passionate about. They've been beaten to death with, hey, you need to make sure that whatever you're doing is going to be useful. And because of that, our most quote-unquote educated people are morons. They are incapable of thinking anything outside of their preconceived notions. They view conflicting data as personal attacks. And when they make decisions, it's mostly about what they feel is going to work, as opposed to what will actually work. And then when things don't go the way that they want, they look for someone to blame. Now, do I think that this is entirely because Reading Rainbow got taken off the air? No. However, nobody is teaching kids to be passionate anymore. Nobody is teaching kids to love anything anymore. And we are constantly bombarding kids with, don't do that, it's not useful. Don't do that, it's not useful. And then as they get older, oh, well, you can do that, but these are the useful things that you have to focus on anyway. And so if you waste your time on that, it's going to make doing the useful things that you have to do more difficult. And then they get into college and they're beaten over the head with the idea of you have to be useful, you have to be useful, and you have to be useful in the way that I tell you to be useful. And right now, we have a bunch of kids and adults that are running around being useful, quote unquote, without understanding what it is that they're doing and having no idea what it is that they're saying. They just repeat what they've been told, and then they've been told that if they do this, this is the reaction that they will get. And if they don't get that reaction, or more commonly, they're told you will do this, and this is one of the reactions you see. If you see this reaction, those are bad people that deserve to be punished. And if you are being useful, part of being useful is punishing these people. You better make sure that all of these people are punished enough so they understand that that is not a useful thing to do. That reaction is a not useful reaction, and not useful things are actively damaging, because they learned earlier that if you do not useful things, it makes everything else in your life harder. Because you have to do the useful things, and if you take time away from doing the useful things, it just means that you're going to be more tired when you do them, and you can never get away from doing the useful things. And nobody is telling anyone anymore, hey, it's okay to have fun, it's okay to be passionate about non-useful things. Because guess what? The non-useful things are more useful than anything else in the world. Tell me one television show that increased sales of anything 800%. I will wait. That's right. There hasn't been one. Even shows designed to sell things are not that effective. Reading Rainbow wasn't trying to sell you a damn thing. And it changed the economy. Tabletop was not trying to sell you a damn thing at first. Eventually, they did start selling things, but that was more. It was more to just fund more tabletop than anything else, and more other things and other experiments that Geek and Sundry was trying to do. Tabletop wasn't trying to sell you board games. Tabletop was trying to show you what they were passionate about, and it translated to breaking a market. Passion sells. Passion changes the world. And right now we have a lot of dispassionate people, or anti-passionate people would be a better explanation. People that their passions are not passion, they are hate and anger and vengeance for all of the wrongs that have been committed throughout society. And I'm not saying those society does not commit wrongs. Society is committing wrongs right now. You want to hear something really interesting? It was something I talked about with my therapist, and I've mentioned on this channel before. You want to know the only group of people that it is 100% legal to punish them for marrying? It is the disabled population. A lot of people don't realize this. There are a lot of disabled couples that may never get married because when you get married, they factor your disabilities benefits different. You are no longer an individual. You are a group of people. And I know people that have lost disability benefits simply because they got married. Nothing else in their world changed. They just got married. They signed a certificate, put a ring on it. And things like lose your disability benefits, you could lose your health care, you could lose just about everything, because just because you're married, it doesn't mean that you can magically work now, that your disability is gone. But because they are factoring two people's disability benefits together, they go, well, now you're making way too much money. Disabled people aren't allowed to make money. It's another fun thing. Disabled people can have our disability taken away if we get money. If we get too much money anywhere, they can just take it away. So, yeah, Disability Awareness Month was last month, and I was so overwhelmed with everything going around that I completely forgot about it. So I understand it's Pride Month. I'm all for LGBT rights and things like that. Don't get me wrong, but I'm disabled. I'm being discriminated against on a regular basis. And I've been told time and time again that being disabled is not okay. That my specific disabilities are definitely not okay. My stutter is horrible, especially on YouTube, having a stutter. Especially since my stutter is not typical. My stutter is entirely psychological. So it gets better and it gets worse depending on how I'm feeling and how much I focus on. It's psychogenic, not psychosomatic. It's a completely different thing. I've had people comment on my videos, I would watch this, but I can't stand that stutter. Neither can I. I hate it. Hate every second of it. But there's literally nothing I can do to stop it. So it's a part of me. Then instead of trying to fit into the mold that I'm supposed to be by editing my videos and scripting everything, and I can do if I rehearse enough, I can do takes where I don't stutter at all, or I stutter small enough that I can take it out with editing. So if I really, really wanted to work very, very hard, I could completely hide my stutter. And I don't. I don't want to. It's part of me. And I don't care if you think that it's an affectation that I put on purpose or not. I really don't care. I don't care that it comes and goes. It used to terrify me because every time I would speak normally, I would be terrified that people were going to go, well, you're making it up. You're faking it. You faker. Real people that have real stutters, you are making them look like a laughing stock because yours isn't real. You make it up for clout on the internet. All that stuff used to terrify me. Still does. But there was an internet show that told me it was okay to be passionate about things. And then that same internet show asked me to share my passions with other people. And when I was really, really young, I remember watching this incredible host tell me about his love for books and show me that other kids got just as excited about them. And I forgot that for a while. And then Geek and Sundry came along and I remembered. And that was really important. It was important to me. It's important to a lot of people. Still is. Even though Geek and Sundry basically doesn't exist. And everyone involved has gone on to do different things. It's still really, really important for a lot of people. And it changed the world. We need more people trying to change the world. And I don't mean going out and screaming at the people that disagree with you. That doesn't change the world. It just changes you. Changes you into a horrible, angry version of yourself. No, I'm talking about people that go out there and do what they're passionate about and share their passion with other people completely unabashed. They don't say, I'm sorry, I'm really excited about this. They just go, I'm excited about this. Isn't that great? We need people like that again. We need them everywhere. I really miss Geek and Sundry. I miss that time of my life. It really felt, especially during the vlogger search and shortly after the vlogger search too, until the vlogs channel got shut down, it really felt that the world had completely changed. To me it did. I don't know about anyone else, but to me it felt like the world I grew up in wasn't real. And it took me a long time to come to peace with this. I really hated a lot of my childhood. I really did. And it's taken years and years and years of therapy to understand, first of all, that I hated it because I told myself I loved it. I told myself I had the greatest childhood any child could ever have. And I didn't in any way, shape, or form. And there's so many things that I just hated doing over and over and over again. And then Geek and Sundry came around and it felt like the world was different. I was working in retail at that point, and I had been for a few years. And I hated working retail, but it was a job and I was good at it. And Geek and Sundry happened, and even though I still firmly believe retail is probably one of the most soul-sucking jobs you will ever work. That's not to say other jobs are not bad or not soul-sucking, but dear God, is retail rough. And it has only gotten worse in the past about 4 or 5 years. It is abysmal. But even though I was working retail, and I hated it, I loved being good at something, hated retail. Even though I was doing that, Geek and Sundry, I was seeing people making a living off of things that they actually liked to do instead of things that they had to do. Started watching a show, I think it was in 2013. I'm going to look it up before I say the wrong thing. There was a show that came out called The Crazy Ones. Yep, 2013 to 2014. There was a show that came out, it's called The Crazy Ones. It was Robin Williams' last TV sitcom. It was canceled, I think, shortly before he passed. I think I can't remember if it was canceled the same year or if he passed the year after, but it's very close to the time that he passed. And the crazy ones, Robin Williams and Sarah Michelle Gellar played a father-daughter duo that ran an advertising company. And I fell in love with that show. I own the entire series on Amazon Prime, and I've rewatched everything but the last episode over and over and over again. I have seen the last episode, but every time I go through a rewatch again, I stop before the last episode because I don't want it to end. But it was another show about people that were just passionate about something that they did. They were working a job that they were passionate about, that they loved. Hamish Linklater played an artist, and he was like, he really enjoyed art. This wasn't, oh, this is the job that I have to do to make money. He was an artist, and he loved doing what he did. And The Crazy Ones was the reason I went back to school to get my degree in marketing. Partly because I never wanted to work in retail again. Oh, God. But the other one was I wanted to work at a company like The Crazy Ones. I wanted to work at an advertising agency where I could come up with crazy off-the-wall pitches and create meaningful change. Which, like marketing, hate marketing, whatever it is, marketing does change the world. It really, really does. For anyone that grew up in the 90s, all you have to do is go, Bud. You guys know. If we go into the 2000s, it is no longer as fondly looked upon because of other things. But if I go $5, everybody knows how that finishes. Marketing does massively change the world. We can go further back. Here's a fun fact. The vision of Santa Claus that most Americans have is owned by the Coca-Cola Company. Their marketing was so effective that the version of Santa Claus that most of the U.S. has adopted was created in a marketing campaign for Coca-Cola. So, anyway, the real subject of this, we need somebody, anybody, to remind people that you're allowed to be passionate about things again. It's been too long since Geek and Sundry's been gone. The world is such a dark and dangerous place now. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that nobody is telling us it's okay to love things and share that love with other people. It's one of the biggest reasons I am still doing this YouTube channel. It's one of the reasons I do my Essential Essence 20. I love the Essence 20 system. I love tabletop RPGs. And I know almost nobody watches my videos. And that's perfectly fine for me. Because this is all I can do right now. And at the end of the day, we need somebody out there telling you it's okay to be passionate about things, giving you permission to be passionate. And if no one else will do it, I will. And I'll do it in the only way I can. And if nobody listens to me, that's on them. I'm doing what I can. I normally don't ask for comments and stuff on my daily vlogs, because comments and stuff like that, like most of the time when YouTubers ask for comments, the reason they ask for it is it feeds the algorithm. And it really does. Any video that people comment on, I get significantly more views on. And because my daily vlog is not meant to be something that's entertaining, or it's the daily vlog is not meant to be something that I'm packaging to try and sell this channel. Essential Essence 20, that is something I'm trying to quote unquote sell. But the daily vlog isn't. So I generally don't do this. But today, if you made it to the end of the video, in the comments, tell me something that you're passionate about. Anything. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be fishing, be knot tying, sailing, shoe shining, video games, making clay pots, whatever. Just something that gets you excited. So much of this world is run on hate and anger right now. We need a little bit of love. We need a little bit of joy and excitement. My depression has been so incredibly bad the past week or two. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm having a really hard time finding joy and passion in anything. So yeah, can't do this on my own. Tell me what you're passionate about. Tell me what excites you. Doesn't matter what it is. There's no wrong. Okay, if it's illegal, I'm gonna draw that line in the sand. Illegal things, no. Anything other than that, tell me what you're passionate about. Tell me what excites you. Put it in the comments. That's all for me today. I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.